Once upon a time. In the quiet village of Jingxi, Li Cheng was celebrated as a prodigy. By the age of 20, he had mastered the Confucian classics, memorized volumes of poetry, and debated philosophy with the village elders. Yet, despite his achievements, Li felt a hollow void in his heart. His accomplishments brought admiration, but they did not bring peace. The villagers often praised him for his intellect, but in the stillness of the night, Li would lie awake, plagued by doubts. Is there more to wisdom than words on a page? He wondered. The great philosophers spoke of harmony with the universe, yet he felt disconnected from the world around him. One evening, after yet another sleepless night, Li made a decision. He packed a small bag with only his brush, inkstone, and a change of robes. He left a note for his family, bowed before his ancestors' shrine, and set off toward the mountains, a place where many said the wisest hermits resided. The journey to the mountains was arduous. Li walked for days, his legs growing weary as the paths grew steeper. The air became thinner, the sounds of the village giving way to the whispers of the forest. He passed towering bamboo groves, crossed roaring streams, and climbed rocky trails. Along the way, he encountered small moments of beauty, the glimmer of dew on a spider's web, the haunting call of a distant crane, and the vivid splash of wildflowers against gray stone. Despite these wonders, doubt began to creep into Li's mind. What if the stories about the hermits were just myths? What if his journey ended in disappointment? He pressed on, driven by an inner need he could not articulate. On the morning of the 7th day, he reached a secluded valley. In the distance, he saw a small hut perched between a towering mountain and a winding river. Smoke curled gently from its chimney, and a figure moved slowly outside. Li quickened his pace, his heart pounding with anticipation. The hermit Master Wu was unlike anyone Li had ever met. His beard was long and silver, his robe simple and worn. He radiated a calm presence that seemed to mirror the natural world around him. When Li introduced himself and explained his quest for wisdom, Wu said little. Instead, he gestured toward the mountain and the river. "If you wish to learn, study them," Wu said. "The mountain and the river will teach you all you need to know." "Li, what was your major experience handling those demons on the island?" Li was bewildered. "How can a mountain or a river teach me?" he asked. Wu only smiled. "Understanding does not come from words alone. Stay here and observe." Though puzzled, Li respected the hermit's reputation and agreed to stay. Wu offered him a small room in his hut and went about his daily routines with quiet efficiency. Each day, Li would rise at dawn, eat a simple meal of rice and tea, and sit by the mountain or the river, trying to decipher their wisdom. At first, the mountain seemed unremarkable to Li. It was simply a vast expanse of rock and earth, its peaks reaching high into the clouds. But as he spent more time observing it, he began to notice its unchanging presence. Storms would come and go, rain would lash its surface, and winds would howl through its valleys, yet the mountain remained steadfast. One evening after a heavy storm, Li sat by the base of the mountain, watching the sunset paint its slopes in hues of gold and crimson. He realized that the mountain's strength lay in its constancy. It endured the forces of nature without resistance, standing tall through every trial. Returning to the hut that night, he shared his thoughts with Wu. "The mountain is unyielding," he said. "It teaches resilience." Wu nodded, but said nothing, leaving Li to ponder further. The river, in contrast, was ever-changing. It flowed endlessly, carving its path through the valley with grace and determination. It danced over rocks, creating ripples and cascades, yet it adapted to every obstacle in its path. One morning, we sat by the riverbank and watched as a fallen branch was carried downstream. The branch floated effortlessly, moving with the current rather than against it. Li realized that the river's strength lay in its adaptability. Unlike the mountain, which resisted change, the river embraced it, finding a way to move forward no matter the circumstances. That evening he told Wu, "The river is humble. It bends and flows, yet it carves through stone. It teaches flexibility." Again, Wu smiled but remained silent. Weeks turned into months, and Li's understanding of the mountain and the river deepened. Yet, he still struggled to connect their lessons. The mountain and the river seemed to embody opposite truths. One stood firm, while the other yielded. How could both be right? One night, as he sat outside the hut, gazing at the stars, Li voiced his frustration to Wu. "Master, I have learned much from the mountain and the river, but their teachings contradict each other. How can I reconcile them?" Wu replied with a question. "When the river flows against the mountain, who wins?" Li thought for a moment. "Neither," he said. "The river flows around the mountain, and the mountain stands firm." Wu nodded. "Exactly. Wisdom is not choosing one truth over another, but understanding how they coexist. Like the mountain, you must have principles that anchor you. Like the river, you must adapt to life's challenges. Balance is the key." The next day, Li climbed to a ridge overlooking the valley. From his vantage point, he could see the mountain rising majestically and the river winding gracefully through the land. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of harmony. The mountain and the river were not opposites, but complements. Together, they created the landscape, each essential to the other. He understood now that true wisdom was not rigid adherence to one way of being, but the ability to embody both strength and flexibility. He felt a deep peace settle over him, as if the void in his heart had finally been filled. When he returned to the hut, he bowed deeply before Wu. "Master, I understand now. The mountain teaches me to stand firm in my values, and the river teaches me to flow with life's changes. Together, they show me the way to harmony." Wu smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Then you are ready to return to the woe." Li bid farewell to Master Wu and the valley, carrying the lessons of the mountain and the river in his heart. When he returned to Jingxi, the villagers noticed a change in him. He was still the brilliant scholar they admired, but now he radiated a calm confidence that inspired those around him. As a leader, Li was firm yet compassionate, holding to his principles while remaining open to new ideas. When challenges arose, he faced them with the resilience of the mountain and the adaptability of the river. In his later years, Li often shared the story of his journey to the mountains. "Wisdom," he would say, "is like the mountain and the river. Stand firm when you must and flow when you can. Together they create a life of balance and harmony." His teachings lived on, not only in the village of Jingxi, but throughout the land, where they became a timeless reminder of nature's enduring lessons.